They're doing strengthening the anti-avoidance tax on multinationals, so they're going to put an extra penalty if they don't pay the right tax. How they're going to work that out, nobody really knows, but a lot of the accounting profession said it's not as simple as it sounds. Indexation of CPI won't proceed. Now, last year they said that they would only index the age pension by the CPI. Currently it's either the higher of the CPI or the 7 capital cities. CPI of 7 capital cities or the average weekly earnings. Generally it's going up with average weekly earnings currently, so it's going up a lot higher than CPI. But that will be kept now, so that won't change. Lowering the deeming thresholds to the inflation rate will not proceed. So they were going to reduce the amount of threshold before you started to get onto the 3.25% deeming rate. They won't go ahead with that. But they will increase the Medicare thresholds before the 2% Medicare applies. Now that's a good thing because obviously the old thresholds were about 20 grand. It's going up a few $100s before you pay the Medicare levy. Probably won't affect too many people here. For couples, couples married parents, couple down the bottom. Yeah, anyway, well, basically it's not a huge change, but they have raised this threshold. Reduce the non-assessable proportion of defined benefit pensions. That's CommSuper pensions or state super pensions. That is changing. Now, it's only if you took a non-indexed pension. So not many people took non-indexed pensions, so it won't affect most people. But it's only going to affect you on the assessment on the age pension. Bit of a complicated formula, but basically around a third of if you took a full indexed and non-indexed pension, about a third is non-indexed. They're now going to say that 10% of that is non-assessable and the rest will be assessable, which works out about 20% of your CommSuper pension now becomes assessable. Most people here wouldn't be affected because most people didn't take a non-indexed pension. GST will apply on imported products, so digital and other services, Netflix tax they call it. Basically Netflix wasn't paying any GST. I don't know how they're going to go because Joe Hockey's going to write over to Netflix in America and say pay GST. I'm not sure he's going to do that. Let's hope he goes all right, but anyway. But they probably will, they may have applied on the actual the distribution networks in Australia. So you probably know you go through an internet provider, they may actually have to pay it, not for sure. So that's going to be helpful for Australian providers because they will actually have a level playing field where these guys like Netflix are effectively getting 10% discount. They can sell their products 10% cheaper than the Australian products. Increasing the new start eligibility, not going to affect too many people here. And the reform of the childcare system. The first one is this nanny pilot program, which is going to help a lot of people who are basically shift workers. They can access childcare through a pilot program, nanny program, which really in Australia we haven't done it. A lot of you probably know in the UK, a lot of people go over, have nannies in the UK. We haven't really developed that market, so that's sort of going to help that market in Australia. Because once you have 2 or 3 kids, and the cost of childcare is actually more expensive than having a nanny at home. Childcare subsidy schemes now going to be replaced by a childcare rebate. Replace the childcare rebate, the childcare benefit, and jobs and education childcare assistance. So a lot of that's going to change. There's a bit of a complicated formula for it, but basically it's income tested, and then you get more money or time the lower income you've got. But the basic story there is you've got to have, if you don't work much, you won't get many hours of childcare, so in subsidy. So it's just there for people who work the long hours, they will get more subsidy. So what do people think of the budget? Well, most people said yes, it's not too bad. They think they're much better. Some people it's about the same, and some people say it's worse. But for most people, it's not going to affect them, except for age pensioners. Really, that's the biggest one that's going to be hit. And it's because the government realises they're not going to get anything that's bad news through the Senate. The reason why they get probably the age pension changes through the Senate is they're going to give the bottom end of the people on age pensions more money, and therefore it's considered to be a benefit to a lot of people who are in the poor end. And obviously they're taking off the rich people. Well, it's one of those things about equity. If you've got over $800,000, you should be able to live fairly comfortably in retirement without the age pension. The other things is that they're really not addressing the major issues, that they're spending more than they're actually bringing in revenue, and it's about 2% of GDP. Oh, sorry, about 5% of GDP, which is still a major amount of excess spending. The key thing is that we really can't get any change until they have until there's a change of government, or there's a basically an election, and that's really going to be the key issue there. That we really have to have an election to get back to seeing whether there's going to be people want change, and who comes up with the change is going to have to face that issue. So at this stage, the big issues are that we can see that the intergenerational issues are coming to the fore now, with more and more people retiring, more and more people living off the government. Even if they don't get an age pension, they eventually go into retirement homes. Governments are subsidising retirement homes to a large extent. They're also going to be much more, people living longer is just a really big issue, and large amounts of people in the workforce who are going into retirement. So basically the story is, this is an inevitable program of change that government's going to have to cut back expenditure. The basic story is, for people, is that most people in this room have looked after themselves well. They'll get through retirement, but as I said, for some people, the lucky generation won't always end in good luck all the way through. So I'll leave those thoughts with you. So hopefully that covers the context of where he's working from. But any questions on that at this stage?
Many.
Yeah, many questions. 2 minutes. So I think that covered a fair lot of ground there, but I think that you can see that the governments are really going to have an uphill battle. All right, yeah.
Okay, just a few observations really. It's interesting when you were summarising some of the health aspects and education aspects of the intergenerational report, because of course we have been somewhat fortunate in the reduction of child mortality. However, the old diseases, whooping cough, etc., are coming back, mainly because we're so well educated, and yet in such a world of better education, we seem to be anti-science as well, and are deciding irresponsibly not to vaccinate our kids. Yeah. And so we're bearing the inevitable consequences of that. So there may be a blip in terms of the health costs for younger people as a result of what were infectious diseases that were that effectively disappeared.
That's right.
Similarly, with the deregulation of university education, university fees may well go up, and we may well be heading somewhere back to the old days where we had to compete for a scholarship to go to university, otherwise we couldn't afford to go. So again, there may well be some kind of retrograde motion in that respect. But the other comment I had was that it seems that governments want us increasingly to pour more money into superannuation and to become self-funded. But the debate that's currently going on about Labour wanting to increase taxation on superannuation contributions, and also we're considered wealthy if we, from superannuation income, have more than $75,000 a year. But there seems to be a disincentive for people to save. So it seems to be a conflict here.
Yeah, I agree.
And for people like myself who are considering retiring in the next 2 years, it's a matter of when do you go.
I'd like to pick up a comment about the about superannuation, because the problem with governments is that they can't keep not retrospectively changing, but they evolve. They keep changing the rules, because obviously it is a big tax benefit. There's $43 billion in tax benefit, tax savings that everyone in this room potentially gets every year to get people to put money in super, because you're only paying 15% as it goes in super, or for most people. So the key thing here is that the total age pension is $40 billion. So the cost of age pension is 40, and we're giving $43 billion worth of subsidy. So there's some argument saying well, you're giving too much in subsidy to get people to put money in super when it's already compulsory anyway. For 9.5% is compulsory. Now, the problem is that the way I see it is the government really should come out and say, this is what we expect everyone, like to some sort of target in 10 to 15, 20 years' time, to say, instead of being, say, 50% of people on full age pension, we expect to only have 20%. Now, they may not have to map out exactly how they get people down there, but it would give people like myself some sort of incentive to say, there's no major incentive apart from the tax to put money in super, because you're saying, well, I'm foregoing current income, current expenditure, and as we know today, people say, oh, I could be dead tomorrow, so I better spend it. But you're deferring expenditure for the future, which is your benefit and for the country's benefit, because the benefit is you're not getting money from the government. But the government really has never come out and said, we have a program for the next 20 years of saying we want to reduce pensioners by this much, and we expect the pension thresholds to go down over time. If you did that, then people would have something to work through. The problem is they keep changing it, like saying, oh, well, there's a lot of people now who've got good super funds, therefore tax them. That's the problem, I think. And the continual change in superannuation, when it's a long-term proposal that you put money away for long periods of time, and the fear that the government could come in and say, oh, well, you're rich now, you're going to have to pay tax, and pay for your own retirement, then pay for someone else's. That's where I think it's inequitable. But the government really just doesn't come out and put out a long-term projection of where they want to go. It will give the whole finance industry some incentive, or give people a roadmap to say, this is what you need to get in retirement. I mean, technically they're saying now that you need $1 million in retirement because interest rates are only 3%. If you're going to live to get $30,000, $40,000 worth of income and put all your money in the bank, which most people won't, but you need $1 million to finance yourself. If we could have a roadmap from the government, yes, that would be helpful. And then you know that the change is going to happen over time, and you can plan for that. This retrospective sort of changing the rules, yes, it just puts people off, and then people say, oh, I'll give up, I'm just going to spend all my money now. So I agree totally, but I think it's a failure of government policy in that area.
But Russell, the problem is that with the baby boomer bulge, the increase in tax expenditures on superannuation is going to accelerate to such an extent it's going to be huge.
Yes.
It could reach double what's being spent on pensions, and that'll be unaffordable for the country.
That's
So the government down the track will have to do something about taxing superannuation differently and increasing at a higher rate than it does now. The problem is we don't know when that might be, and it'll be a lot of pressure, obviously at the political level, from the whole of the community that will cause the government to have to do something.
Yeah, that's right. It's inevitably going to be taxation and less benefits, or both, or combination, of those two. But I mean, the current government's basically putting its head in the sand, saying, "Oh, we won't tax superannuation, we won't change it," because they've now got a point of difference with the Labor Party. But inevitably they're going to have to do it. But even the Labor Party is not; they're only going to tax people with incomes over $75,000 in allocated pensions, and the tax would only be 15%. So not massive taxation. If you've got $75,000 income inside a pension fund, you'd have to have over $1 million invested to get a $75,000 income. So, you're not talking about people who are going to live in poverty in the streets. It's potentially 15% tax on an income over 75 is not going to hurt too many people. But it potentially could be that they say the thin edge of the wedge. They'll drop it to 50,000 and then 25. But yeah, they're just massive issues coming up, and it's just a matter of you've got to just keep ploughing on and put money into super and make sure you look after yourself, irrespective if they tax it. Yes, yeah.
I'm wondering if some of those massive issues which haven't been addressed particularly are climate change, population increase, and what both of those do to basic things like food supply.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's right. These are the sort of things that for thousands of years, these things happened. People had, you can go back to the Krakatoa example. The Krakatoa put so much soot dust into the atmosphere, there was literally a winter all through Europe for 1 year. So there's no food grown. Plants were dying, animals were dying, humans were dying. That was 1860 or something, I don't know the exact number. But these sort of things happen. These things happen. So we've had such a dream run, we haven't had. Well, I mean, let's say if California had a major earthquake, what would that happen to the world? You know, where all the major Hollywood studios are, where the major internet providers are, all the major, the food bowl of America in the California, the company got a 4-year drought there, and they're rationing water now. I don't know if you noticed, there's no walnuts on the shopping shelves because the California produces a large amount of the world's walnuts. Because they just can't get the water, they're not producing it. So those are the sort of things that can happen that we forget that we've had such a fantastic run of no major world wars, no major epidemics, and no major catastrophes.
I think it's a bit more insidious than that though, because we're getting the background that gives us climate change now that we haven't had for thousands of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and climate change is the slowly creeping things. It's like the frog in the hot water. It eventually gets you, but you don't realise it's happening.
Oh, yes.
Russell, another question you could ask, rather than do you think this year's budget is better than the 2014 budget, you could ask the question, do you think this year's budget, in the light of what you've said about the intergenerational report and the government not being brave enough to address the issues, you could be asking the question, do you think this year's budget is a responsible one for Australia's future? And I'd suggest the answer would be different from what's out there.
That's right. I mean, most people are saying, does it hit my hip pocket? But really it's saying it's not a really good budget for the country. Not.
I'm all right, Jack, but the country is...
Yeah, we don't care about the country. Right. The government can have all the debt it's like. We just got to be looked after. Don't upset the ladies.
Russell, can I just ask something about your GDP on health expenditure at 4%? And you mentioned about the whooping cough and the increased incidence of that. I would have thought that was less of a problem than childhood obesity, and that you would seem to think that the GDP percentage would be higher given those problems in the longer term.
Yeah, it shows up in diabetes, yeah, that's right. I mean, when you go back, I wasn't saying, I mean, because we didn't have those for the last 50, 60 years.
That's why.
That's why I'm saying
right.
it hasn't been a cost in the society for a long time. Potentially it's coming back as...
Yeah. Although I think we're blessed compared to US, where it's approximately 70%.
No, is it? Yeah, the obesity rates, yeah, much higher, yeah. And China, actually, China's had their obesity rates are the quickest growing in the world.
So really?
They've gone from nothing to about 2% of their child population got obese.
Yeah.
Because they've just gone straight into fast foods. And
They let Macca's in.
yeah, that's all it says. Yeah, so. Anyway, thanks for coming, and yeah, hope you got something out.